Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov, good evening. We are together. I am not in New York, but we are at Shiviti, New York, so Beruchim Habayim. For those who missed last week's class, it will be uploaded B'ezrat Hashem in the coming days so that you can catch up on last week's shiur. Nonetheless, we are continuing where we left off last week in the introduction of Rabbi Haim David Halevy to his book, Devar HaMishpat. Last week, the overall sentiment, the summary of what we studied together, is that the most glorious and incredible legal system is only as good as the lawmakers that execute judgment. And that a corrupt legal system with honest and just lawmakers can actually go much farther than a legal system which is beautiful in paper. But when executed by the wrong people, is the most disgusting and evil thing that can exist in the world. A lot of what we know as Jewish people, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in this sentiment, they say don't judge Judaism by the Jews. But at the end of the day, so much of what we see that is wrong in the Jewish community is not that Judaism never said that. Those are incorrect or misled applications of things that are written in Judaism, that were described by our Jewish lawmakers. Our Torah relies heavily on the fact that in every generation we are not just people of the book, but that our lawmakers are going to guide us on the path that is correct. It's not just a legal system written down in a code of Jewish law that we follow as robots throughout history, but dor v'dorshav. Every single generation and its challenges, every generation and its complications, every generation and the things that got better in this generation than were in the last generation. And inept leadership will always create problems for our people. But today we're going to explore just how important that is. And before I get to that, I just want to share with you a story. There once was a shofet, a judge, in Yerushalayim, in the Jerusalem court. And two young Haredi yeshiva students, a man and a woman, had just been married not so long before, maybe a year before, maybe two. Talking about 19, 20-year-olds. They came to court because they were getting divorced. And in court, they were trying to reach some kind of agreement and settlement between the two of them. And you have to understand, you're talking about people who, he doesn't have a job, she barely graduated high school. There's not much between the two of them. No major houses, no yachts, and no vacation home in Florida. No, there's nothing that these two people actually own much of. They're going to sue each other. It's probably over the potatoes and last week's chulent. There's not much to their name. And they come to court, and they're fighting, and they're cursing each other, saying terrible things to each other. And at a certain point, the judge, and I'm going to point out, this judge was not an observant man. To me, that doesn't make much of a difference, but just in case you're wondering, he was described to me as a person with a bald, clean-shaven head, no kippah, an older man. And I say older with a lot of respect. Our rabbis tell us zaken stands for Zeh Mishe Kana Chochma, somebody who has acquired wisdom. Clearly this judge was a man of wisdom. And he looked at these two, and he said, little boy, Yeled Katan, come here. So little girl, now this is court, you're a judge. It's supposed to be protocol here. So little girl, come here. I want you to hug each other. Two people that have been fighting for quite a while, they're not really so excited about hugging each other, let alone these are the two people who come from a society in which you would never hug in public in the first place. They said, now! They give each other a hug and they both start crying. It says, now little boy and little girl, listen to me. You're going to walk out of that door, and I never want to see you here again. Go get a therapist, go talk to your rabbi, go figure out how to make things work, but you don't belong in my courtroom. And he went home. And how do I know the story? Because Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz was the sandak at this couple's Brit Milah for their grandchild. Now, this is one of those happy ever after Hollywood stories. Those of us who've been in serious relationships and those of us who unfortunately have experienced divorce know that not all divorces end with a hug and a kiss. And then unfortunately there's some really bad things that people have experienced and suffered, and it's not intended to argue with that at all. But that the lawmaker could be sitting in an Israeli court system, and you can argue if Israeli laws are corrupt or they're not corrupt or they're about to be corrupt, or everyone has a different opinion nowadays on what's going on with Israeli court systems. But one thing you can't take away is that at any time and place, when you have a lawmaker who understands the severity, the weight that is on their shoulders, that a person's life is in front of them, that person will always be able to tap into some wisdom that will cause them to do an incredible job with the tools that they have. And when you have a person, when you have the greatest rabbi in the world, greatest dayan in the world, doesn't matter what the title the person carries, who is insensitive, who is a cruel person by nature, who doesn't take things seriously. It could be they're not bad, there's nothing in their life is serious. So your life isn't serious either. Then that person's application of halakha to everyone's life around them is going to carry the stamp, the watermark of the person who applied that halakha to other people's lives. And with that in mind, I want to read to you the next section. So we are in Devar HaMishpat. It should be the page. Of course, these pages have no page numbers. Why would I send you something with no page numbers? So I'm going to count PDF. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It should be on page 6. There should be 3 little stars in the middle of the page. And the first word of the next paragraph should say, Ve'en ze maspik. Do you see those words? Ve'en ze maspik? And if I got the page number wrong, please tell me, because I'm guessing what page you are in the PDF. Very good. And if you can't follow along in the Hebrew, please don't worry. I'm going to translate everything for you. And I ask one thing. While I'm reading, forgive my voice. Yesterday we were baking matzot all day long, from sunrise up until past sunset. And so my voice is, I've been screaming, L'Shem Matzat Mitzvah, at the top of my lungs for a good 12 hours. So forgive me, it's a little bit sore today. Ve'en ze maspik. And it's not enough. She'ishiyuto shel hashofet tavtiach Mishpat Tzedek. You cannot guarantee a Mishpat Tzedek, righteous judgment, based solely on the personality of the judge. It's not enough. There's another element that is required. The way, the manner in which the judges sit while they judge is crucial to an outcome that is just. Now let's explain for a moment. In the Torah, our judges always sit in groups, so it's never one judge. What our rabbis tell us? Alti dani chidi. Don't judge on your own. Ki en dani chidi. The only one who can judge on their own. What does it say in the Mishnah? There are 30 people on this call. What does it say in the Mishnah? Ki en dani chidi. What does it say? I know you all know the answer. I'm asking you what it said. Ki en dani chidi ela echad. Only the one who is called one, Adonai is one, can judge a person on their own. Why? HaKadosh Baruch Hu bochen kalayot valev. You can see into a person's heart, into their mind, into their soul. The rest of us, who are we that we can judge a person on our own? And therefore, part of the way in which we sit in judgment is always in a group. Groups of 3, groups of more, always an odd number. We're going to talk about that much later. But he's not talking about the number of people that are sitting there. But while the judges are sitting in the Beit Din, it's very important how they sit there. צורת ישיבתם בדין המלווה בהרגשת חרדת הדין, which is accompanied by the awe of judgment. For a judge to realize that what's happening here in this room is very powerful. Yeah, I might go home and take a lunch break soon. But the person who's here in front of me, whatever is going to be decided here, I'm going to change their life. But it doesn't matter if we're dealing about 2 people fighting over real estate, if we're dealing about 2 people that are thinking of getting divorced, a person who's on trial for murder, a person who's coming to the Beit Din because they want to convert to Judaism. No matter what it is that the Dayanim are dealing with right now, you are dealing with someone's life in your hands. Khirdat hadin. There should be an awe of judgment that is here. on behalf of the judges, not on behalf of the person who's standing in front of the judges. It adds this severity of the judgment, the awe of judgment, adds an extra level of weight, seriousness, to the whole aura of the court in general. And it's this aura, this feeling of judgment that causes righteous judgment to occur inside of the Bet Mishpat. How so? Let's first see. Kach pasak Maran b'Shulchan Aruch. This is what Maran, Rabbi Yosef Karo, writes in Shulchan Aruch. If you want to look it up yourself, it's in Choshen Mishpat, in the 8th chapter, in the 2nd halakha. Maran says the following. Before I tell you about Shulchan Aruch, I'm sure all of you are familiar with my stance on the Shulchan Aruch, and if you're not, you're welcome to hear my shiurim, especially those I taught in the London Chavura on Maran. It's 3 parts there on YouTube. Many people want to know about halakha, but very few people start studying halakha from the area of Choshen Mishpat. What are the 4 sections of Shulchan Aruch? Someone tell them to me slowly. Okay, let's start in the beginning. What's the beginning? Start with the Orach Chaim. Okay, Orach Chaim, the ways of life. What's inside of Orach Chaim?
The tefillin, tzitzit.
So Shabbat, holidays, prayer, all the daily life activities. Orach Chaim, volume number 1. Volume 2. Yorei De'ah, very good. It was Winston, right? Winston, what's in Yorei De'ah?
Kashrut, how to slaughter animals, things that require a little more skill and study to understand and pursue.
Okay, so you're viewing Yorei De'ah as a step up. Okay, I'll take it. But Yorei De'ah are the laws of kashrut, the laws of family purity, the laws of tzedakah, the laws of conversion, the laws of many other areas of halakha. In the world as we have it, usually people who are just trying to be regular, observant Jews study Orach Chaim. It contains most of what they need to know. Tzedakah and those things are also relevant in Yorei De'ah, but usually people who are going to take halakha a little more seriously will start studying Yorei De'ah because those are areas of halakha that perhaps somebody would go ask a rabbi or the like. Fine. Next section of Shulchan Aruch. Even HaEzer. Even HaEzer. What's an Even HaEzer?
The laws of marriage and the Kehillat.
The laws of marriage and divorce. So marriage and divorce on the 3rd section of Shulchan Aruch. And the 4th?
Choshen Mishpat.
Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate of judgment. Those are all the halachot of business, of money, of finances, partnerships, all of those halachot, contracts. They're all found in the section of Choshen Mishpat of the Shulchan Aruch. You know, they always say rabbis learn parts of Yorei De'ah, maybe parts of Even HaEzer, Dayanim know a little bit more. They once tell a story about a rabbi in Ashkenaz who he was once approached by a young man, a yeshiva student, who said, Rabbi, can you please give me simicha? Ordain me as a rabbi. He says, sure, let me test you on halakha. Do you know the laws of Choshen Mishpat? Said, Rabbi, I'm not going to sit in a bedin. I don't need the laws of Choshen Mishpat. So okay, so what about Even HaEzer? Even HaEzer, Rabbi, Even HaEzer is for people who want to write gitin, divorce, do marriages. I don't even have a community to need to lead them in such a way. So okay, what about Yorei De'ah, maybe laws of kashrut? He said, Rabbi, come on, I didn't go study laws of Yorei De'ah. I said, okay, what about Orach Chaim, the day-to-day living? He said, Rabbi, if I would have studied any part of the Shulchan Aruch, you think I would have to come to you for a certificate? I'm coming to you for a certificate because I don't know anything. That's why I need a semicha certificate. Unfortunately, our requirements for rabbis are very, very low. And it's really a terrible thing that we have this understanding in our mind that what is a rabbi? Somebody with a certificate, they know X amount of information, they probably don't know anything else that they didn't study for that information. And it's really, Jewish people need to know Judaism. It doesn't matter who you are. What makes you a chacham or a chachama is when you know Judaism. If you're a rabbi with a diploma but you don't know anything about the Torah, then are you, maybe you're a rabbi by paper, but are you really a rabbi? And if you know all the sections of Shulchan Aruch, and you know Tanakh, and you know Mishnah, you know Torah, so you're not a Talmid Chacham now? You're not a Talmidat Chachamim now? You don't need anybody else's certificate to tell you what you are. The only one who needs that certificate is the person who doesn't have anything else aside from the qualification to be able to speak like that. So Maran and Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat, Harav Peretz once told me, if you want to know the beauty of halakha, study Choshen Mishpat. Study the ways in which our Chachamim tried to bring peace between people in the worst part of life. This is where people are fighting over their money, over their business, over their house, over everything. Promises they made each other, breaking promises. That's where you're going to find the beauty of the Torah. When you're going to go to the world and show them how Jewish people do business, not how they do business, how they should do business according to Shulchan Aruch. That's when it says, Am Chacham v'Navon Hagoy Hagadol Hazeh. Look how beautiful these people are. Look at what a wondrous nation. If I'm going to go across the street and teach the people there the laws of melicha, how to salt a cow after you slaughter it, I mean, it's part of halakha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to do that. But which glory to Judaism or the Torah or mitzvot does that bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaShamayim is a beautiful section of Shulchan Aruch that almost no one studies. Almost nobody. And you see a shift in Jewish culture. We've shifted away from its study. So if you look at any questions of responsa of our rabbis, you can tell a lot about a generation from what the generation studies. So when the generation studies certain things, you can tell what the generation is dealing with. If you want to know what a generation dealt with, go look at the questions that were asked to those rabbis. I don't want to make anyone feel bad, so I hope no one's going to feel bad by my example. If you look at the Shelot v'Tshuvot of the Ben Ish Chai, and those of you who learned with me for a while, you probably heard this before. Shelot v'Tshuvot of the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad wrote a book called Rav Pa'alim. In the first question he was asked in Baghdad, I'm talking to you about 150, 200 years ago top. They asked him, said, Rabbi, I'm a very simple Jew. I study Torah. I read Zohar all day. I believe in the 13 principles of the Rambam. I just wonder when I pray and I say the L'Shem Yichud prayer, when it says to unite the Yud K with the Vav K and the Shchinta, what does that mean? What am I saying? And the Ben Ish Chai responds, I'm going to give you a very simple answer. Very simple. I can't get into detail. And 14 pages later, the Ben Ish Chai is still explaining what he's trying to explain about the Yud K and the Vav K and the Shchinta. Kabbalist or not, that's what the generation of people who are dealing with the Ben Ish Chai were writing about. That's why he starts his book with. Fast forward to a later generation. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Alav Shalom, is on the Lower East Side of New York. He opens up his monumental Igrot Moshe with a very important question. The question, what is the minimum size of a kippah that a man has to wear? Is it a small kippah? Is it a big kippah? Does it have to be seen from all directions of the head? Is it enough if you see it only from one side of the head? And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein pulls together some strings, and the honest truth is that if you look at the Teshuvah, you'll realize there's not much classic information in that Teshuvah, because it seems that until the Lower East Side, most Jews didn't even talk about this question, how big does my kippah need to be? When I look at the Teshuvot of a generation, it doesn't tell me about Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Chas v'Shalom. It tells me about the people. What kind of question do you ask a person that you view to be the leader of the generation? What are you dealing with? Where is your head at? And as we keep going forward into the world, Jews start to obsess over things like what size your kippah needs to be, what color your kippah needs to be, what material your kippah should be made out of, and less over what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what does it mean, the Shekhinah, what does it mean, what am I involving myself in? So you see this with today's Shelot v'Tshuvot also. If you look at any book of responsa from our Chachamim over the generations, they were pretty much split up into these four categories. Orach Chaim, Yoreh De'ah, Even He'ezer, Choshen Mishpat. As we go forward in time, we notice almost all of the Shelot v'Tshuvot deal with Orach Chaim, the laws of Shabbat, the laws of prayer, your tefillin. I was looking at a pair of tefillin. Somebody wanted to check out their tefillin. I went to go look at the tefillin. This one brags they have 30 chumot on their tefillin. I was, no, I have 40 chumot. I started looking at them, and I'll tell you the truth. I don't even know where they made this stuff up. I'm looking at all the stuff they added to the mitzvah. I don't know where they came from. Since I got my tefillin as a bar mitzvah boy, they added so many details to tefillin that I'm not sure that when my kid becomes a bar mitzvah, that his tefillin are going to look anything like mine. But the laws of Choshen Mishpat, you can see entire books of halakha printed that will never talk to you about business ethics, Jewish ethical financial practices. So Choshen Mishpat, look what Maran writes. Maran says the following: Tzrichim hadayanim leshev be'ema bira. The judges must sit be'ema, with awe, bira, with fear, be'atifa. What is atifa? What atifa means?
Wrapping in the talit?
Wrapping of their head. There's a certain, you don't go outside without your kafiyah, if a person were to walk into a bedin of our Chachamim, they probably wouldn't recognize that the three people in front of them are not wearing streimels or black hats or whatever they think they're going to wear. They were wrapping their head in a sign of respect. That's the way you go when you walk in an important place. Uvchoved rosh. But most importantly, with seriousness. It was a serious place, the bedin. V'asur la'akel rosh. It's forbidden to be lightheaded in the bedin. V'leshev l'saper divrei betala. In my book, in Shulchan Aruch, it says bidvar betala. Bevet hadin. So when you are sitting in the bet hadin, you can't just talk about idle chatter, what you see on the news, what happened to your friend, what about your sister. You can't talk about those things in the bet hadin. Even us, it's a bedin for a giur. We don't deal with anybody's life. We're not changing the world in Choshen Mishpat or Gitin. But even then, we have a special room where we talk, and a special room where we sit. And when we sit in that room, that's where we sit. And that's what we talk about. And we want to catch up with each other, so we go back out to the lobby of the bet hadin. Anyone who's been there has been there. V'yireh hadayan, and the dayan should feel, ki'ilu cherev munachat lo al tzavaro, as if there is a sword that is resting on his throat. U'ki'ilu gehenom petucha lo mitachtav, and as if hell is open beneath his feet. I'm not going to give you a shiur now on Jewish concepts of hell, but just imagine it's not a wonderful thing, okay? V'yeda, and he should know, mihudan, who is he judging? V'lifnei mihudan, and before whom is he judging? Umihu atid liipara mimenu, and who is going to give him his consequences if he misjudges? Im noteh mikavadin, if he deviates from the law. So the judge is sitting be'ema bira, in awe, in seriousness, dressed properly for the occasion, not talking about nonsense, not making jokes. More than that, who is he judging? Who is the person in front of me? Before whom am I judging? And who am I going to have to answer to when I misjudge someone else? And here Rabbi Haim David Halevy points us to something fascinating, that if it wasn't written down, I wouldn't be allowed to say it. Lo et baalei hadin bilvad dan hashofet. Don't think that a judge who judges is only judging themselves. Judging the person in front of them. Rather, a person who is judging is not judging just the person in front of them, but they are judging themselves. They are also stepping up for judgment. If the judge deviates from that which is righteous and that which is just, essentially, that judge is obligating themselves in a penalty. Nobody asked you to be a judge. But now that you are in the capacity of judging other people, you have now opened yourself up to the ability to be judged by the creator of the universe for flaws in judgment that you make, errors in judgment that you make, mistakes, deviations, perversions of the law. He should imagine that there is a sword resting on his throat. And that hell is open beneath him. And as the Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin tells us, that every judge who takes one away from one person property that doesn't, and gives it to someone else that it doesn't belong to, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take away his soul. What does it mean, take away his soul? What does it mean? If the people come here to fight about a car, and the judge says the car doesn't belong to you, it belongs to him, but that's wrong, it's a mistake. What does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take away their nefesh?
God forbid, kill them.
That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will kill them. A judge who sits on the bedin, and even involves themselves in something petty, like financial matters, but perverts justice there, that judge will be liable for the divine death penalty. It's not a task for everyone. And not only that, it will be as if ki'ilu dan la'kadosh baruch hu. I'm afraid to read when I'm reading, Cheva. I'm Anyone familiar with the king Yehoshaphat? You heard of him before? I'm always afraid when I ask Jewish people about the Tanakh. I'm assuming somebody here knows, so that's why you're not saying anything.
He's in one Melachim.
Okay, so King Yehoshaphat, in this story here that we're about to bring this quote, King Yehoshaphat comes to Yerushalayim and appoints judges. And as in the background of that story, he's returning to Yerushalayim, what's happening there, don't worry about it right now. When he comes to appoint judges, King Yehoshaphat warns them of something. He tells them, Re'u, ma atem osim, ki lo le'adam tishpetu, ki im et Elohim. Be very careful, he says. This is Devar HaMishpat. Be very careful about who you're judging. Because it's not you. It's not the person in front of you that you're judging. But it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you're judging. Mikol devarav b'Midrash Rabotenu. This is the verse that comes from the Midrash by our rabbis. The Midrash says the following. V'hadayanim yu nohagim ema be'atzmam. The judges should treat themselves with fear. Kivyachol HaKadosh Baruch Hu hem danim. As if they are judging HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shekach amar Yehoshaphat hadayanim. This is what Yehoshaphat told the judges. Ki lo le'adam tishpetu, ki im Elohim. You are not judging people, but you are judging me. Amar Rabbi Chamar bar Chanina. Rabbi Chamar the son of Chanina said, Bo'u re, come and see. If this was not an explicit verse, we would never say it. This is a heretical thing to say. Basar v'dam dan leboro? A human being of flesh and blood can judge their creator? El amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'dayanim, but this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells all judges. Heyu nohagim ema be'atzmechem, kilu oti atem danim. Treat this very seriously, because it's as if you are judging me. Ketzad, how can it be? Adam oseh mitzvah achat afanai. If a person does one mitzvah before me, gazalti liten lo mea sadot. I've decided to decree that this person deserves 100 fields. That's why they have what they have in the world. But if you, judge, come involved and get involved, and you take away one of those 100 fields that really belong to him, I will reimburse him for my own money, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I will treat it as if you stole a field that belongs to me. Listen to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying. You think you're a judge. You think as a judge you have some type of immunity. You're given a job, you have to see facts, you have to see figures. Then you decided this person's field doesn't belong to him, it belongs to that person. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you didn't steal from them. You stole from me. I will pay them back, but on your account. Be very careful when you judge another human being. Because it's not them that you're judging. It's me. It's my decisions in this world that you're taking away from people. Kach ma'amid dayan et atzmo kemi shedan lemי she'amar v'haya ha'olam. And so when the dayan sits in the Bet Adin, and this is what they're thinking about, it brings HaKadosh Baruch Hu back to center stage. A judge who has in front of them HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shiviti Adonai l'negdi tamid. I envision HaKadosh Baruch Hu before me always, especially when I'm judging. When I'm judging, I have to realize it's not a game. I'm stepping into the role of the Creator. And as such, I'm opening myself up to a world of judgment. But when I do that, and I take HaKadosh Baruch Hu into consideration, and when I judge as if the Creator of the universe was the one before me, V'shofet Mishpat Tzedek. That causes a judge to rule righteously in judgment. And so here, we introduce the concept that might not be so popular. We live in a world in which increasingly presentation is not supposed to matter. It's actually ironic because it seems that most people are spending more time on presentation than they ever used to. So if it's not just about all the way that people dress and people the way they present themselves, but today with all the way people edit their looks and their images on social media and all the videos they make and all the staging of things that happen. So ironically, we live in a world where a lot of people actually care a lot about the way things look. But we speak and we tell the world, don't judge me for what I look like, don't judge me for this, don't look at me like that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen, the way you dress is maybe the way you dress. And the way you sit or talk is the way you choose to sit and talk. But the way that you dress and sit and talk and act and eat and speak, all of that creates an environment around you. You might not like it. It might not feel comfortable for you. But at a certain point, the Dayan has to realize your Bet Adin is not your living room. It's not where you speak with your friends. It's not where you make jokes. I watch many court cases. It's something that I shouldn't do so much. But I like to see what's going on in the world, and I like to see it by way of the court. That way I don't have to know it by way of reporters or people who are going to lie to me. And when I watch court cases, I see different types of judges. Some judges that I'm not sure how they're still sitting in that throne of judgment. They're such miserable people and such bad dispositions. And some judges that I'm in awe of their wisdom and their patience. There was a murderer recently on trial. And I was very impressed with it. I don't think that everything was handled correctly, but I think that the judge showed an incredible amount of wisdom. The aura, the environment that one creates around Mishpat also causes for Mishpat Tzedek. And that's why our Chachamim are so particular in how we present ourselves when sitting as a Bet Adin, for the purpose, not of honor or dignity, but of the purpose of achieving true justice for the person that is sitting in front of us, as if that person was a Kadosh Baruch Hu. But we're not done there. There's another point that Rabbi Haim David Halevy would like to make. And this one is important. And it's one that we don't always like to deal with. But let's deal with it. קיומה התקין של כל חברה אנושית מותנה במשפט צדק. This sentence is a very important sentence. All societies exist. Yes, you exist. A society exists. Do unjust societies exist? Do people live in unjust societies? All the time. But how is their life in that oppressive regime? It's terrible. So here, it's not about existence. The world will continue to exist even if we're bad people. But for a person to live in a society that is takin, that is civil, that is correct, that is good, then every group of human beings on earth require Mishpat Tzedek, righteous judgment. This is true and fitting for every society. Look in parentheses. ואף לחבורת פושעים ורוצחים דרוש צדק פנימי לשם קיומה בצוותא. Even thieves have a law, a code between them. Even murderers, mafias, cartels, they have some kind of code. We're not telling you it's a good code, but every society recognizes that in order to be able to function together, we need some guiding principles. Sometimes you hear about how certain criminal societies, what their principles are, and it makes you wish you didn't ever have to know those things. It doesn't matter. Every society has a code. And that code is crucial to ensuring that the society will continue functioning. כי בהיעדר משפט צדק מתערער האמון של היחידים בחברה. Because when you have a society that has no righteous laws, no righteous judgment, then the individuals of that society begin to lose trust in the establishment of law, of justice. וכל סדריה מתמוטטים. And then everything else that needs to be taken care of in that society falls apart. When a person has no faith in the system, then that system has failed them. What happens when a system fails them? Then all hell breaks loose. All things change. But in judgment, especially in Am Yisrael, there's one extra level here. It's in Am Yisrael, by Am Yisrael, שהשגחת השם שורה עליו, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has divine providence over, מתבטא היעדר משפט צדק גם בעונש חמור. By Am Yisrael, we believe very deeply that the lack of Mishpat Tzedek is also going to be the consequence of terrible tragedy. חרב באה לעולם על עינוי הדין ועל עיוות הדין. Our rabbis tell us in Masechet Avot, chapter 5, that sword, war, disaster comes to the world for two reasons. Al inui hadin ve'al ivut hadin. They both have to do with law. Does anyone know what inui hadin and ivut hadin are and what the difference is between them?
Inui din, it's usually when a court takes longer than it should be. And ivut, it's twisting judgment.
Very good.
Twisting judgment.
So let's give basic terms. There are obviously among the mefarshim different hairs that wish to be split. I'm not going to deal with that now. Inui hadin means the suffering of judgment. Like, where do you find the word inui in the Torah? We have a mitzvah to suffer. Where? Not always. Jews, they take it too far. But we have a mitzvah of inui.
Yom Kippur.
Very good. What does it say in the Torah? V'initem et nafshotechem. You must afflict your souls. Now, we have very clear ways. How do we afflict ourselves? The first thing that makes Jews sad is to stop eating or drinking. No matter how long we stop eating or drinking, that makes us sad. So we stop eating or drinking. The next thing about shoes and about, all the rest is inui hadin. Inui hadin is the suffering of judgment. This has to do with the length of time that it takes for the legal system to bring a person to justice, to give a person a trial, to reach a conclusion in judgment. I'll speak about that in a second. Ivut hadin, on the other hand, is when, even if a society judges quickly, but the judgment itself is unjust. It's perverted. Ivut is from the word to twist something. So yeah, you can have a court which, sure, everybody who comes in, they just kill them. That's not a din, that's ivut hadin. Inui hadin is something that is much more common in a legal system like ours than ivut hadin. Sure, we definitely have ivut hadin. We're not a society that is exempt from ivut hadin. We definitely have people that are suffering tremendously because of evil legal decisions. I'm not talking about that. Inui hadin is very common. How common is inui hadin?
Divorce.
Okay, tell me, what about divorce? Is inui hadin?
They take a long time to make a decision, and people meantime suffering. Families.
Who's they?
Breaking apart.
Who are we blaming here?
The Beit Din. The Beit Din.
Is it the Beit Din that usually takes a long time to make a decision about divorce?
Whereas Beit Din want them always to go and have shlom bayit, and that take longer and longer.
I don't think that's true. There are Beit Din. Sure, they're always going to be bad Beit Din. I'm asking, ivut hadin. What is ivut hadin? Inui hadin. Inui hadin, where does it happen the most? Divorce court, you're going to have a lot of people fighting. It could be the husband who's responsible for inui hadin. It could be the wife who's responsible for inui hadin. But if you write in the chat box, I can't see it. So don't. I see people writing, but it doesn't help me.
So in conversion?
Okay, so everyone's going to a very religious place right now. Conversion, sure, there's definitely an element of inui hadin, but by conversion, Linaz, there's a whole nother prohibition. There's a prohibition of
Not antagonizing the ger.
ona'at hager. So by hurting every person, it's a crime. But hurting a ger tzedek, one invokes. Yeah. Right, so lo tunu is lo tunu ishat amito. We have a prohibition of not oppressing another person. But in onat hager is 36, according to sample scheme, 46 biblical prohibitions. So I'll just put that into context. To eat meat and milk together, and most is 3 biblical prohibitions. Yeah. What about to eat an insect? If you really believe everything they tell you, you didn't wash your lettuce. You knew that there was a worm in there. You chose to eat it. 2 witnesses warned you beforehand. Hey, you go there. How many biblical prohibitions might one violate?
1, 2.
Sure, it's 3.
I think someone once I once saw a poster when I went to a restaurant. I think they said 7. Okay, 7. Good. What about inui hager? That's 36 biblical prohibitions. 46 biblical prohibitions. I'm going to go on the lenient side. I don't want to make everyone go. 36 biblical prohibitions. 36 biblical prohibitions. Chavre, you might as well go eat a cheeseburger. Leave the gerim alone. You're going to say, oh, in our family we don't marry gerim. Good, so you know what? You might as well just go to church. It's going to be better for you. Oh, in our school we don't take gerim. Good, so you might as well go eat lobster on Yom Kippurim. It's good. You're not going to violate the 36 biblical prohibitions doing that. But that's already by a ger tzedek. I'm talking about a regular court case. Where do we find inui hadin? Where?
Sorry, in secular courts.
Okay.
No?
So in our court system in America,
Trial for years.
People could be on death for years.
very good, very good. So I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read to you some numbers that I printed. off of my computer in 2019. And just for transparency's sake, these numbers may have changed a little bit. They all come from the Prison Policy Initiative. You and I are going to spend an extended amount of time on prisons later in this course. But for right now, just some numbers that you should know. How many people are locked up in the United States? Anyone know that number?
Hundreds of thousands?
I'm asking for a number.
I don't know.
3.5 million.
Okay, it's less than that. Less than that. At least in 2019, the number was 2.3 million people. I need to understand that 2.3 million people is larger than many other countries that exist in the world. 2.3 million people. Out of those, 1.3 million are held in state prisons, 612,000 are in local jails, about 220,000 are held in federal prisons. From that number, do you know how many of those are children? How many children are held in prison?
A million?
No, thank God it's not that much. It's about 46,000 children. 46,000 children are sitting in prison. From that, you should know, a little over 8,000 of them are held there on technical violations. So they're not... okay, I didn't come to talk all about prisons right now. But I want to tell you the number of people that are sitting in prison without a trial. I'm going to ignore the race and the genders. I'm going to all that for right now. So from the people that come into prison, maybe before I tell you the number, how many jail admissions are in the United States of America every year? Admission to jail doesn't mean that a person is going to stay in jail. Admissions to jail?
None of us search this issue.
But you live in a country that you think is a just country, and you fight very hard that other countries should look like. So I'm asking that when you go to sleep at night, how many people are sleeping in cages? So 10.6 million Americans enter prison every year. It's 10.6 million people. That doesn't mean they stay there, but how much is 10.6? You want to think of how large is 10.6 million people? If you were to take prison buses and fill them with prisoners and start lining them up, if you would start in New York City, where many of you are right now, it would be an unbroken chain all the way until San Francisco. That's how many human beings enter prison in this country every single year. How many people in our prison system that are sitting there have not been convicted of any crime? Someone said, but you're hiding behind my camera so I can't see who you are. Someone told me the people who are, you answered the question about Inu Hadin, 76% of people held by jails are not convicted of any crime. 76% of people that are held by jails are not convicted of any crime. So why are they sitting in a jail?
But you said you know your day.
Why?
Not enough judges.
Bail.
Bail. Thank you, Jonathan. What is bail, Jonathan?
Bail is a amount of money that is set usually by the judge that is determined usually by what's the previous record, what was the crime committed, would they flee? It's essentially a ransom that holds people. It literally is a ransom that holds a person in a cell, and it doesn't matter because if you can't pay it, you can't get out. and my wife wants to say that it was her suggestion bail, but I said it because I'm closer to the computer.
Okay, thank you very much to both of you. I won't make Shalom Bayit problems tonight. So, people that are sitting in prison, 76% of the 2.3 million people that are sitting in prison, I am not a mathematician, you could tell me the number off the top of your head. Those people are sitting there because they can't afford to be home. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and likely I'm not going to, I really wanted to finish this paragraph, but Yonatan, you talk about your wife. My wife said that maybe my class is too long last week, so I'm going to try to limit myself a little bit. When it comes to the prison system, we have an attitude. My wife, in one of her PhD classes, I sometimes eavesdrop on my wife's classes when she teaches them. So in Yeshiva University, she was giving a course on social work ethics. And one of the famous development of the Elizabethan laws, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is that essentially we divided poor people into what we call deserving poor people and undeserving poor people. Certain people we've decided deserve our compassion, and other people, they don't deserve our compassion. The reason why most people don't stay up late at night because of the people that are incarcerated is because we've made a decision as a people that the people that are in prison are not good people. They don't deserve our compassion. If they do, it's not the compassion that I would give my neighbor, my friend, my child, my student. There's the people that, they're scum of the earth. That's how we would think about it. And that's exactly where the mistake is in this conversation. Because I want to give you an example. Here's an example. Last year Pesach, no, not last year Pesach, 2 years, maybe even 3 years ago Pesach, someone tried breaking into my home. I was sitting at the Seder with my family, and 2 felons, they were convicted felons in the past, they were out of prison, they tried to break into my home. And I threatened them, and they ran away. I'm not going to get into details on the camera. The police came, took fingerprints, all of that. If chas v'shalom, those people were to enter my home, and I were to defend my family, and I would kill the people who tried to kill my family, would I be legally allowed to do that? Could I protect myself in self-defense in the United States of America? Yes. Now, I also live in California. Anyone know about Castle Doctrine? Do you know what a Castle Doctrine is? Someone tell me about Castle Doctrine. Winston, you got a thumbs up. You go for it.
As a proud Texan, it means that if someone breaks my property and threatens my life, I can respond with force.
As the other proud Texan.
Oh no.
I'm going to actually add they don't actually need to threaten, at least as far as Texas goes. I can't speak for every state laws. They don't actually need to threaten your life.
They just need to be on my property. It's true.
Okay, so
property, and they might have to be threatening harm, but they don't have to threaten to kill you, and you can kill them by U.S. law. I mean.
Okay, so what's the difference between
California? They need to kill you first.
No, so what's no politics? What's the threat here? What's the importance of Castle Doctrine as opposed to a state that doesn't have a Castle Doctrine? What would I have to do in that situation?
You would have to employ non-lethal means of driving them away with the risk of your own life.
Right. Essentially, this is a stand your ground law. I'm allowed to stand my ground. I'm allowed to defend my castle. This is my castle. It's my home, correct? But I can't.
You should be.
But there are places where that's not the case. So in a place, I'm telling you, I have the right to stand my ground. I don't have to have. It's a judge can't say, "Oh, you could have run out the back door." Can't say, "Oh, you could have used pepper spray instead of a knife." That's not something that could happen, but shouldn't happen. Yes. Now, what happens? A police officer comes to the scene. More police officers show up to the scene. What do they see? They see a man or a woman defending their home, and there's a dead person on the ground. What's the next step that a police officer does? Who do they arrest?
They arrest you.
Who do they arrest?
The owner of the home.
The homeowner. Why? Why?
Because it's happening on your property. No?
What are they being arrested for?
Because someone else is dead.
Right, someone else is dead, and presumably this person killed them. So who do they arrest? The homeowner. But what do they say? No, but it was in self-defense. What does the police officer have to say?
Take it up in a court of law.
Yeah, tell it to a judge. I'm just a police officer. There's a dead body on the ground. You're holding the knife. That person, listen, you even call 911. It doesn't matter. They get arrested. They get arrested and they go to court. They go to prison. Yes? Now, there's time they have to go to court. The court is going to decide whether they can stay home until their trial or not. Yonatan, that's when bail comes in, right? In order for the person to go home to their family, that they just saved their life, it could be that their kid is even wounded or their wife is in the hospital. In order for that person to go home, what do they need to do?
Pay money.
They have to pay money. How much money? Give me an example of a normal bail. Don't give me a crazy bail. A normal bail.
3,000.
How much?
Not in Portland or Seattle anymore.
Yeah,
for nothing.
Tell me how much bail is.
Between 5 and 10.
For a murder case? For a murder case?
$250,000.
100. Let's say it's $25,000, $30,000. That's likely what. Let me say $25,000, $30,000. Now you have to pay your bail. How many of you have $30,000 right now in liquid assets that you could bring to court to go home? And if you do, raise your hand because I'll send you a donation letter from Shiviti. No. How many of you have $30,000 to go?
Bail bonds. You get a bail bond loan, and they cover it.
Chevre, it's very likely that a person who's otherwise an upstanding citizen of this country, who has a job, who has a family, who has a spouse, who has money, who pays their bills, who has a mortgage on a home, could end up in prison and not be able to get out because they can't afford to get out. And how long do they stay there for? Until when is a trial? I don't actually know the number of how long it takes in America to get to a trial, but it doesn't happen tomorrow morning. It doesn't happen in a day, it doesn't happen in 2 days. And that's how you end up with 76,000 people sitting in prison. And that could be you, your spouse, your child, your friend, a person who did nothing wrong, but hasn't yet been able to get to trial or couldn't afford their bail. But what I'm saying doesn't mean that all your feelings, like some of you are feeling, because I see some of you, and I've heard some of the comments you've made in the last couple of minutes, doesn't mean that you're not justified about certain people that get out on bail and certain people that should have stayed in prison. It doesn't make a difference. What it means is that you live in a country where routinely Inui Hadin exists. A person can wait 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to get to trial. Only to go to trial and be let off. And then those 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, what are those days, months, years, if not the classic textbook definition of Inui Hadin? Why does someone have to wait so long to be told, am I a free person or not? How long is one going to wait? I don't know. Sometimes a person gets to court, the paperwork isn't in order, the judge says, come back in 6 months. We were so quick to talk about Giur taking too long, about Gitin taking too long. There are no numbers in the world of Giur or Gitin that even reach 76% of 2.3 million people. Inui Hadin is a real problem. Why am I highlighting it? Not to tell you the United States of America is bad. Chas v'shalom. I started the last week's class. We're lucky to live in a good country. But that even in a country that prides itself on freedom and liberty and justice, you can argue to what extent, is still dealing on a day-to-day basis with the tragedy of Inui Hadin, even if the judgment at the end comes out correct. What do you tell a person who you've taken away from their family for 2 days, for 5 days? You lock them in a cell, you take away their clothes, you body search them, you put them in a prison cell, they suffer sexual harassment and being kind on camera. What do you tell to a person who comes out innocent at the end of that? Aside from Inui Hadin, what do our Chachamim tell us? Cherev ba'a la'olam. Tragedy comes to the world. Al Inui Hadin v'al ivut Hadin. Not just because of perverse judges, corrupt lawmakers. That's only half the problem. But even in a society that has righteous judgment, what about the suffering of the people who are going right now through the system? What about them? What is the logic? How does that work? Masechet Shabbat, lamdu zot min hamikirot. In Masechet Shabbat, our rabbis taught us this from the sources, from the Torah, how that works. But says Rabbi Haim David Halevy, I don't have to resort to biblical argument. The logic that exists here is obvious that the answer is found in the suffering of the individual who goes through our legal system. When the person down here who's a mekupach, they're an oppressed person, they're right now going through the system and they bring their judgment in front of a court of earthly beings. Mishpat Tzedek. Mahir, and he merits righteous judgment and swift judgment. The heavenly court is able to refrain from getting involved in earthly matters to ensure that justice happens to this individual. When everything goes fine, the mechanism is working great, judgment happens not just righteously but swiftly, the Bedin Shel Mala, the heavenly court, doesn't have to get involved. But what happens when that's not the case? But when the weak person, the individual, does not merit righteous judgment, in parentheses, or he merited righteous judgment. She got through the court case okay, they got innocent in the end. But you held him or her there for too long. They suffered by the system. By the way, when we finish a giur, has anyone ever been to my bedin? When we finish the giur, what's the first thing, before we bless the ger, what's the first thing we do to the ger as a bedin? Anyone know? Yeah, we ask for forgiveness. Thank you, Rabbi Schofield. I just did a giur last week. And as soon as we finished, I brought the 3 dayanim together, and in front of everybody in the Bet Hadin, I said, on behalf of the dayanim here, we ask for your forgiveness for anything that we have done to you in the last year or 2, whatever long it took, for anything that we made you feel like you weren't wanted, any time that you felt that we were being too hard, anything that we said that was insensitive, anything that we did. And all that we did because we wanted you to enter Am Yisrael righteously, and we're asking now for your forgiveness. And we ask you to please not leave here without forgiving us. It's a very vulnerable moment. When we go from being people that are in control of a person's destiny and their life and deciding when they join Am Yisrael, to at that point them being in control of our destiny. It's a very powerful feeling, a very vulnerable one. And Baruch Hashem,
I'm Mitchilov.
Yeah.
I feel that way with my tummy.
Yeah, any person in any leadership capacity should feel this way. Yeah, but I'm telling you that this is something that a dayan has to know. What is the individual who is suffering injustice supposed to do at this moment? What should the individual who is suffering do when the last open door, the court system, was slammed shut in their face with a corrupt judgment? This individual has no choice but to call out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, please take care of me, because the people here that are responsible will not take care of me. I heard a man today in court speak about how he was bullied in school for his last name, and how there was not one person in the whole school district that was a resource for him to turn to and to say, I need your help. Save me because I'm considering suicide. What is a person supposed to do when the last hope is when I go to court, they will take care of it for me? V'Hashem yitbarach shemo, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, avi yetomim v'dayan almanot. Where does it say that? Hashem is the father of the orphans and the judge of the widows. Tehillim. Ohev mishpat, soneh gezel be'olah. Yeshayahu the prophet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves judgment, but He hates people that steal and then bring sacrifices to the Beit HaMikdash. I don't need your religiosity if you're an evil, corrupt person. What does Hashem do? Katav b'torato. Hashem writes in the Torah, V'haya ki yitzak elai. And when this individual called out to me, V'shamati ki chanun ani, and I will hear their voice, because I'm compassionate. if you judges on earth have no compassion, I will listen. You don't want me to get involved. מכאן העונש החמור לדיין יחיד המתת דין, וכאן העונש החמור לחברה שמוסרה המשפטי נתערער. Here, says Rabbi Haim David Halevy, is the origin, the source, for what happens to a judge who perverts judgment or even does righteous judgment but takes too long. Or to a society whose legal, judicial, moral compass has become perverted. Cheva, I'm not afraid. This is a Ben Midrash, a Shiviti Ben Midrash. Those of you who were getting upset earlier, it's okay for you to do teshuvah. It's okay for a person to say, I don't have compassion on people that my Torah says I should have compassion for. It's okay. Every time, a person at any age in their life can change. It doesn't matter who you vote for. It doesn't matter which political party you're inclined to lean to. It doesn't matter if you're which side of the religious aisle you're on. It matters if this Torah is important to you. I'm going to give you homework, and then I'll read to you one last sentence. My homework is to read the first chapter of Yeshayahu. We're going to start there next week. Rabbi Haim David Halevy is the one who prescribed it. It's in parentheses, Yeshayahu Aleph. Read the first chapter of Yeshayahu. Look at what Yeshayahu Hanavi is telling the Jewish people. We didn't make this up. Come on, I'm telling you everything that I told you today, I didn't make it up. Look at Yeshayahu, and then we'll talk next week. But before we talk, I want to read to you the last sentence. V'lachen, and therefore, Hityachasu Rabboteinu zichronam livracha. Our rabbis of blessed memory treated Devar HaMishpat, the matter of judgment, bira v'cherda be'ema vira, with fear, with trembling, with awe. As it says in Masechet Sanhedrin. Let me just read it to you. In Masechet Sanhedrin, here. The Gemara says the following. Rav, ki hava ate levedina amar hachi berut nafshe. Amar hachi. Rav, when he would come to court, he would say the following to himself. So Rav was a dayan. When he would come into the Bet Adin, this is what he would say. Berut nafshe liktala nafek. Speaking about himself. Of his own will, this man is going to his death. Meaning, I am going willingly to my death. Utzvi bete letu aved. And not only am I willingly going to my death, but even the duties of my household, I'm not performing. What does it mean? The duties of my household, I'm not performing. Let's start there. Why does a dayan say, I'm willingly going to my death? What do we learn so far? Because if I make a mistake in the bedin, if I pervert judgment, then that judge is liable for the death penalty. We read that so far? Now why does it say while he's in the din, he's not doing the duties of his house? Why?
We learned last week that a judge should hate money, so he's not providing.
Okay, Lilina, that's the next sentence. Very good. This sentence means while he's busy with the bedin, he's not being a husband, a father, a child. The person who's judging is not doing any of those things. When I go to the Bet Adin, I have to take a whole day off. I have to travel to Los Angeles. I'm not there for anybody. We'll continue. V'rikan lebete ayel, and he comes home empty-handed to his house. And Lilina is now telling me what you were saying. What do you mean he comes home empty-handed? It would be worth taking off a day from my duties if I came home.
Like with a salary.
Yeah, with the salary, with some money, with some good bribes or whatever else he takes. But a dayan is not to take money. So not only am I going to something that could cause me to die, I'm doing it at the expense of my family, and there's even nothing that I'm bringing home for it. I've got nothing to show for it. My only prayer is that my return to my house should be just as I left it. I should be just as innocent coming home as I was when I left. This is the tefillah that Rav used to say every single time he came to the Beit Din. Can you imagine if the dayanim, the judges, Jewish or not, that we have, would recognize it's not a winning investment for me here. Now you're going to ask next week. That's next week's shiur. So what's the point of it? Or why should a judge be a judge? What's the point? If it's this dangerous, then let somebody else do it. That already has to do with the responsibilities. But a person should say, not only am I not getting anything out of this judgment, it's dangerous for me. My only prayer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow me to enter my home just as I left it. ומתוך הכרת האחריות הכבדה המוטלת על שכמו לקיומה של חברה האנושית. And when a judge is aware of the burden that rests on their shoulders to uphold the existence of society, ולמעשה לקיומו של עולם, or even the existence of the whole world. שכן על שלושה דברים העולם קיים, because the world, our rabbis tell us, stands on three things. על הדין, on judgment, על האמת, on truth, ועל השלום, and on peace. When a person judges this job, moral society is the basis of the whole world, not just of humanity, but the existence of the world. Our Chachamim tell us that without deen, there is no world. We destroy the animals, we destroy the plants. It's the quote of Rabbi Isaac Cardozo that I read for you last week. We love the world. And that's why we judge. But the only purpose is to reach Mishpat Tzedek. How do we reach Mishpat Tzedek? By recognizing the awesomeness, the responsibility that a society that is guilty of Inui Hadin and Ivut Hadin brings disaster to the world. And a society which brings a tzedek, righteousness to the world, is a society that makes life worth living. And the difference between those two is a very thin hair. It's a very fine line. And we should pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that as we go forward, we don't just think about Jewish national law as some legal code, as some social code. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a responsibility that we have to the creator of the universe to always be cognizant that though this is his world, we were put here to execute his will and to make this world a better place, not just for Am Yisrael, but for the whole world. And we cannot afford to fail to do that. We can't afford to continue going forward in time and to see society deteriorate because of our lack of leadership. But we must step up to the plate and teach that we can judge the nation, Mishpat Tzedek, a judgment of righteousness, which no individual will have to scream out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not have to have compassion and get involved in earthly matters through evil ways, because we'll be doing the job with righteousness, with goodness, with humility, with responsibility, and with dedication to righteousness, to the truth, and to being good people. Bezrat Hashem Yitbarach will continue next week from where we left off.